The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
I went to Parliament on Monday with Mahi and a camera crew to interview Chris Hipkins.
Oh.
And you know, like when you're travelling with a camera crew and there's those like funny doors in the press gallery and it's hard to get through, and we like couldn't get through, and I wasn't wearing my glasses, and I saw this button and it said press hard.
Oh no.
Mahi goes, don't press that. It was too late. I'd lost
too
control of my arm by then.
What could you do?
And it was the fire alarm. And I set off the fire alarm.
Did you evacuate all of Parliament?
Oh, that's what I was so scared was going to happen. But anyway.
Is this how we inadvertently found out that like the fire plan for Parliament is just to let the press gallery die? They just like make sure the fire's contained in the wing. And like...
that button is still connected to a text message that goes off in Trevor Mallard's pocket. Tēnā koutou katoa, it's gone by lunchtime with your friends Annabelle Lee-Mather,
Kia ora.
Ben Thomas,
Morena,
and our very own Rick Rubin, Samuel Robinson.
hello.
It's Wednesday, September 6th. There are 38 days to Election Day. There are 26 days to advance voting starts. There are 110 days till Christmas. And it's very much campaign mode because as we speak, on the agendas of the two Chris's, who could be Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon is at Rockin' Gelato in Christchurch. And Chris Hipkins is currently at an innovation centre to see robotic arms developed for use in horticulture and research.
I know where I'd rather be.
So it's like 6 o'clock gold, 6 o'clock news gold already. Who knows what will happen with that? Something about scoops, possibly. And good news for political podcast lovers, Ben. There's a whole slew of new ones out there on the pod waves ahead of the election.
If you're a Gone By Lunchtime listener, you will love New Zealand political podcasts, a genre invented by us. And boy howdy, with the election drawing closer, they have never been thicker on the ground. There is a new political podcast that dropped this week called What's the Story, Old Glory, hosted by recently retired MP Todd Muller and the former Chief Executive of Irrigation New Zealand, keeping us up to date on the US election trail ahead of 2024.
Unmissable.
Wow.
If you wondered what was going to happen to Todd Muller's deep, stentorian, velvety tones after his retirement from politics, wonder no longer.
Wow.
Because he is going to they've undertaken to keep us company for the next 15 months leading up to polling in the presidential election. Those are all the new political podcasts.
Amazing.
Today on the agenda, we have National's tax plan, Labour's need to pledge the rival launches, TAC ads, and a guest spot from Nelson Mandela. But first, we were in Christchurch on the weekend before last, hosted by Word Christchurch. It was a lot of fun. We made you feel very welcome. Very intelligent audience.
Great audience.
Very intelligent audience, genuinely. Leanne Dalziel was there and the bad boys of Brexit were there. And it was fun. But we were, as you expect, we were mobbed by lunchies as we left the theatre. One of whom in New Regent Street, Kurt. Hello, Kurt. Demanded to know, he was very upset. He was very upset in a nice way that we had omitted to mention one of the main kind of political strands in Aotearoa of late, and that specifically is, Annabelle, I'm going to put this to you, your pigeon situation.
Yeah. The pigeons are fine. there's a lot of them. They've had a tough winter, but they're in trouble. There's trouble on the horizon. Like inflation is finally going to bite for the pigeons because I feed them my kids leftover school sandwiches in the morning. But
Why would you do that?
Because I just find it hard to throw kite in the rubbish.
But the cost of living crisis means that you can no longer give them the sandwiches.
Well, no, it's more that I've actually been given one of those new green wheelie bin things, so now I don't feel so guilty putting bread in the
flimsy things. Yeah.
So they're going to be doing it tough. They're going to be very much in the squeezed middle between native birds and I don't know what people. Yeah.
Speaking of the squeezed middle, as we elegantly segue towards matters in politics, National launched its tax plan last week, didn't it? Yes, it did. And that tax plan, which was much awaited, had promised many benefits for the proverbial squeezed middle in the form of shifting around of tax brackets, which have kind of, what do they call it? Fiscal creep has meant that people have moved up through the tax bracket, so addressing that and also some shifts on tax credits. And they did a tax calculator and they calculated everything by the fortnight, which turns out fortnightly savings are twice those of weekly savings, and therefore a larger amount of money. It included, in order to pay for all of that, there's some pretty major cutbacks in terms of public service. But also they introduced 4 new revenue measures, one of which wasn't having a go at sanitarium, which some of us got very excited about over a few hours there. Wasn't that. But two of those, Ben, have come under scrutiny in the days since. I think it landed pretty well, the tax plan.
I think it landed particularly well. I think, what did Jenna Lynch call it? Political marketing genius.
Gee. Right.
And it did. It sort of had this almost kind of crystalline lattice sort of appearance of just this perfectly kind of sculptured and architected, as if created by a robot arm in a lab being visited by the
gelateria.
Prime Minister. Frozen yogurt made by AI.
Since then, I don't know if a crystalline lattice can unravel, but parts of it have come under greater scrutiny, and there are 2 particularly. There's the tax on offshore gambling, which will require some new legislation. The law there is kind of pretty old porridge, really. But also this tax on...
It would require gamblers not to take risks.
It would
require gamblers not to gamble with a VPN. Yeah.
That's a great point. And then because foreign ownership of New Zealand property would be reopened on properties over $2 million, then there would be a tax of 15%, and that has been questioned by some, not just the Grant Robertson, but actually people who are non-partisan tax experts, blah blah blah, in terms of A, whether or not the revenue is there that they need, and B, whether or not it would be a breach of not so much free trade agreements but the tax treaties. How do you sense, Ben, that has played out in terms of the crystalline lattice, the latticed crystals, the gelateria of life? Has National's original plan started to look a bit crumblier?
Yeah, I think with some of these questions arising, particularly around, I think the foreign buyer tax or fee, as it's been recast, a bit more like a sort of crystalline, gleaming Jenga set. And look, I'm going to put my hand up and say I'm not particularly well qualified to talk about the law around international tax treaties. And honestly, it's not something that occurred to me at all when I was writing my first sort of response to it in a column last week. And with the criticism that's sort of come out, so there are two real criticisms of this plank of the revenue raising arm of the policy. The first is it may not raise, the assumption that it will raise $740 million a year seems quite high. It's been described as heroic.
Heroic's got a lot of work lately. I love the use of heroic in that term. It's very nice.
And the second is that it may not actually be possible without sort of alienating our trading partners and breaching various undertakings. On the second part, there's been a lot of criticism, but most of that has been from economists, from David Parker. It was interesting. Robin Oliver, a former deputy commissioner of IRD, and generally acknowledged as sort of kind of the tax guru, kind of in the private.
He said, "It's fine."
Yeah, he said actually that's sort of fine.
Just got to word it carefully.
Yeah, and then you kind of get into this argument of sort of National said, well, as long as we call it a fee rather than a tax, which I think was a separate point to the one that Robin Oliver was making, we can do it. And then you kind of reach the objection of like, well, if you already debuted it as a tax in your press release, and then you sort of say to overseas investors, actually, it's just a fee.
And we're talking about
a
tax?
Typo. Yeah, like what? Right? No,
those are just
no
some
taxes
notes.
here, just some fees, just these fees. And so there is a certain kind of fiction around it. So look, I don't know. I'm going to have to. I'll have to defer to the experts on that in terms of is it technically doable? In terms of the assumption, the assumptions around raising the money certainly does seem a high number. That could probably be maybe explained. You could maybe explain it with pent-up demand. You could also say people have said, well, there's a property crash coming to China. I mean, to me, that suggests a reason for investing in a rule of law country with an artificially propped up property market under any circumstances in New Zealand. So, I mean, that's just sort of arguable. Whether they will be able to get the full $700 million a year from it, look, it's certainly seems you might want to price that in at a discount when you're considering the tax settings. At the same time, as we'll get on to, all of this may become immaterial once Prefu is announced next week, where we'll see that actually all of the parties are doing a bit of an imaginative exercise.
But interestingly, National has, Nicola Willis has been very clear that the tax pledges are locked in. And they in order to kind of forestall those questions around whether or not that she's like, no, that's locked in. Annabelle, you are an international tax expert. What is your assessment of these questions around revenue measures?
If I was to use a national term to describe them in terms of the gambling tax and the fee, the new fee, international buyers fee. I would say it's definitely bringing a strong rinky-dinky vibe. And if you aren't a tax expert like I am, then I strongly suggest you watch Jack Tame's interview with Nicola Willis last Sunday, where he carefully peels apart the entire policy. And I think probably the most telling part of that interview is when Jack asks Nicola Willis if she'll release the full model, because the numbers just don't make sense. That in order to achieve the amount of revenue needed, you'd need 28% of New Zealand houses to be bought by foreign buyers, when pre-COVID, I can't remember what the percentage was or the way it works, but it was around 3%. So, I mean, Nicola Willis is a smart woman, and I reckon she probably knows all her timetables right up to 15. So that makes me wonder, in terms of the 2 million, do they know that actually that number's not going to work, and they're just presenting it as here's a number for now, and then in 2 years' time they'll be like, that number didn't quite hit it.
They all are, because they're all based on forecasts, right? And so there is this is the fiscal hole idea is all about showing a hole in the spreadsheet rather than saying that these numbers will be what plays out.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers add up, right? It's just whether you can...
Yeah, and then there is $700 million. That's where the heroic bit comes into play, isn't it? I mean, the one thing, talk about rinky-dinky, I'll tell you what, the international tax experts such as you have really got their mojo back as a result of this policy, which is very exciting for everyone. Jack Tame is on fire at the moment, or holding people's feet to the fire in both parties. He was very tough on Chris Hipkins on the weekend as well. Shout out to Jack Tame. The other policy of recent times was Labour's, which was announced at their launch. We'll get onto the launches in a second, which is We've talked about the year 2026 on this podcast a bit before and how incredible it's going to be. The expanding dental care, I think it's to the age of 24, maybe, 24 or 25 by 2025, and then to people up to the age of 30 or under 30 by 2026, Annabelle. And it's interesting. That's the 8th of their 10 cost of living measures. It's kind of weird because the cost of living crisis, I think everybody agrees, is right now, but the solution is sometime in the future. So it's sort of when the cost of living crisis won't be as acute. But this is more ambitious than some of the other stuff, as other people have noted. During that launch, the Labour Party launch, GST of fruit and vegetables was not mentioned once. So that has not gone down so well. There were various people saying, why not do something a bit more ambitious, like expanding eligibility for dental care in the universal health system. Is this one going to be more effective? Does it matter that it's a few years from now? It's a game changer. Sorry to say that word.
That's okay. You can say game changer.
I don't.
I think will it change the game? I don't know. Will more people play the game? Perhaps. I think that it's a policy that will have wide appeal, and it will not only will it appeal to the people in their age bracket, but I think also their parents who are currently acting as bank of mum and dad and forking out for people's dental care, if your parents can actually afford it. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's not as comprehensive as the Greens dental policy, but if you guys listen to this podcast, you'll know that dental care is one of my pet peeves. And what I would really like to see from anyone is a dental plan that addresses what's happened to our kids' dental care. When we were kids and we had the murder house, the joy of calling out the next person who has to go to the murder house.
Do you remember those little cotton wool bees they used to make? Did you ever get those? With bits of cotton and stuff? Sort of, which made it even more sinister and terrifying. These kind of crazy little draped little tiny insects that were meant to make you feel better as they drilled deep into your gums.
My mum says...
These trainees for the first time getting in there.
My mum says when she was a kid, they'd literally put mercury in your hand and let it roll around in a ball. But anyway, the point that I want to make is when we took dental nurses out of our kids' school, we've basically damned generations of children to not getting access to dental care, because even though they talk about the mobile buses and you can get called into clinics and that, for people whose parents don't have the luxury of being able to take half a day off school to ferry your kid to and from those dental clinics, or if your kid happens to be sick on the day the dental bus turns up, those kids aren't getting the care that they need, and that those problems follow them through until adulthood. So I think in an ideal... I'm daring you guys, I'm putting the challenge out there. Come on, ACT, come on, National. I know you guys want it. Try and trump them. Go Māori Party.
Well, go
Greens. Let's bring back the murder house.
Bring back the murder house.
It's a great way to also do youth offending. If you play out, rip their teeth out.
Well, cross-party agreement on the Murder House Amendment Bill of 2024.
I think you'd want more specifics because they might all have different visions of what that entails.
Ben, the policy as announced came into criticisms, including how are you going to achieve this if you've only got one of the 20 mobile dental units that you promised at the last election? And the Dental Association, or whatever they're called, said, this is too expensive. Graham said, no, we've factored that in. Obviously, there aren't the dentists, so that's another reason apart from lacking the money. They need to get some more dentists in. They put them on the super green list. Your take?
Set aside a 3-bedroom house in Papakura to whack 50 of them in.
Wow, that's a movie.
Look, I mean, I'm sure it'll be a popular policy. You wouldn't find too many people who are against dental care. Like Annabelle was saying, even for middle class people, the spectre of going to the dentist and then finding out how much the bill will be for your next appointment is enough, is enough to put me off.
You are going to the dentist literally after this podcast.
I'm literally going to,
This is real experiential podcasting.
If we keep the tape rolling and the pressure keeps on the politicians, it might be free.
You know what?
Let's keep podcasting.
Yep.
It's because when I was with each of my children when I was pregnant, it's really hard on your teeth. So my teeth it's a long story.
Right. Also,
it's a very expensive long story.
Also, those years in Ibiza, they had an impact too.
Absolutely.
So it's the only way you can't criticise the policy as sort of misguided, because I think it does it would help a lot with access issues. The real basis for criticising it, I think, or the vulnerability for Labor is, they haven't been very good at delivering anything. Where Labor have delivered, I think I've said a billion times before, is things where they can literally just solve it with a stroke of a pen, increasing the minimum wage. Hugely successful in that, massive increases in the minimum wage, because all it takes is for the minister to sign something in the executive council.
Increasing benefit levels.
Yeah, increasing benefit levels, same thing. You got to find the money from somewhere, but that's easy enough. You borrow money, you borrow money from overseas.
Building hundreds of thousands of houses under Kiwi. Oh, no.
But on that, Labor actually has done a good job in terms of building up our housing stock again. The mistake they made...
State and social housing, yes.
Yeah, the mistake they made was over-promising what Kiwi Build was going to do, some magical thinking. But, that's also the risk of the tax plan, the fee being proposed by National. We're just trying to dig our way out of a housing crisis, and we're going to open up the market again when there's no backup plan for more housing to be built, with 28% supposedly of our housing stock, over 2 million, being sold off. So, it's a real danger in that regard.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the fourth Labor government. A podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
The most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the fourth Labor government. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-Off or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Climate Adaptation.
We are the Pōtiki of the Taiao.
And the words of those keeping the home fires burning.
It's more than just going along and planting some trees. You got to be able to defend that place to the end of your life.
We have the solutions. We just need to come back to the belief in ourselves as rangatira.
Join me, Nadine Hura, and Ruia Āpirahama, the Kōpapa Korangi Series 2, Ahi Ka. Brought to you by Te Komato Te Tonga, the Deep South Challenge, out now on the Spin-Off Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
We had over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday a kind of launch versus launch. Labour Party had their campaign launch on Saturday at the Aotea Centre. National Party had theirs at the Dewdrop Centre in South Auckland on Sunday, formerly known as the Vodafone's Events Centre. I went to both of those. I think both parties would be reasonably happy with theirs. There was some reporting, as people would have seen, of 5 interruptions to the Labour Party launch by Brian Tamaki's flock, shall we say, and they popped up like jack-in-the-box or like whack-a-moles, and then they were dragged out, happily for Labour.
Was that dude inside like the most beautifully dressed protester you've ever seen?
He had tiger print on his blazer.
It's like a beautiful sort of florally blazer.
That guy came last
nice
in a local board election. But yes, it was a good blazer.
It was a beautiful blazer.
And at first it wasn't clear, because he stood up and sort of raised his arms, and it wasn't clear Helen Clark was speaking. And I think she thought, this is very nice. It's good to be hailed in this manner. Hasn't happened for a while. Doesn't happen when I go to the WHO. Good to see. And then he sat down. And then he stood up again. I think maybe and then he stood up again. He was right in the middle of the stalls, and it's like it was sort of by design, I think, so difficult to drag out. But it was good for the event to some extent. Because the first one happened during Helen Clark's very good speech, which again I think was probably designed as a little, in part, to go 2005, everybody, and she kind of hinted at it. But also it meant that they had a trial run, they had a practice. So by the time they started popping up during Hipkin's speech, they knew what the drill was, which is start saying, what were they chanting? Go Labour Go or something like that. And then other people would hold up bright red Labour T-shirts to kind of surround them so that they weren't available. And then Mike Williams got involved at one point, sort of strong-arming somebody. But it actually kind of roused them a bit. The crowd it was a reasonable sized crowd there. Yeah. They kind of got animated by it all. So it sort of in a way worked to their advantage. And it was a bit more of a kind of, they obviously didn't want to do it in the town hall because then it would be too tempting to do comparisons with 2017 and 2020, particularly 2017, but it didn't feel it didn't feel like a kind of overly sober or whatever. It didn't feel too bread and butter. It was quite a... Reb Fountain sang, because Don McGlashan, shout out to Don McGlashan, who has been unwell. Hope you get a bit of Don. Then the next day, National was much more glitzy and glamoury. I described it in a piece.
In its heartland of Manukau.
Well, I was like, they would have had to definitely Google search where the dewdrop is.
I did think maybe a few delegates might get lost along the way.
Well, actually, the last time they did an event there was when Judith Collins was the leader of the party, and that long ago. It was the 2021 National Party Conference. It was the last time we did for a National Party event. And that was quite a different energy, I think it's fair to say. That was when old David Carter was getting really cross about the presidency, and Judith Collins was faking questions about Chris Bishop having... he said something in a direct message about not being for the conversion therapy. But anyway, it was just, those were bad times. This is a much better time, and the mood it wasn't euphoric, and I think they were trying to go for that a bit. But there was a sense of kind of genuine confidence. You could just tell a sort of expectation, I think, and they went very kind of like Las Vegas and the Auckland suburbs. I described it in my piece as being part like a kind of build up to a UFC title fight and part like a school hockey prize giving. It had that kind of, they called all the candidates out to the stage, name by name, to the stage, like this, da, da, da. Everyone sort of cheered and held up their signs, and then...
I want to imagine it as like a sale of the century vibe.
Oh, yeah.
With the
Steve
MPs
Parr.
sliding.
In their socks.
I want them to slide down in
good.
their socks, and Luxon is like Steve Parr and Nicola Willis is Judith Kirk.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
That's the energy that...
I don't know why you're not earning more money doing these sorts of events.
Thank you. I reckon I'd be amazing.
You would be amazing. You would be amazing.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that we forget about Luxon, because people sort of see him as, he's the staid sort of business guy, his background is actually in marketing and advertising, right? And branding. And, I think... the first staff member that he hired when he became an MP, because, you only get sort of enough funding for one person in Parliament, and he hired somebody whose primary skill was videography.
Right.
And, so I think we're starting...
Do you remember that video that we played early on?
Yeah, the kind of pimp walk to his maiden
so funny.
This like chopped and screwed kind of music that sort of...
Oh, I gotta find that.
And and I think that's sort of coming back, that kind of the sort of visual way that he sort of sees the world, in terms of sort of advertising, branding, images, that kind of thing. And I think we got a bit of a flash of that at the launch. I thought I didn't go to either. I couldn't sort of rouse myself, but it was, I thought they both played pretty well on TV for the sorts of things that both of them would have been going for. Labour really tried and true formula by now, the New Zealand musicians, the live performance, the, sort of cultural sort of performances and greetings, and and the kind of rah kind of rally, and National have sort of even before Luxon have been kind of trending more towards these kind of TV set pieces.
Yeah, I mean the thing you don't see on the TV versions, of course, which is a really important part of it, is the earlier speakers go very hard on knock on the doors, hand out 1 million pamphlets, we need you out. So there is a good part of the motivation for these events is to rally the troops, to get the volunteers kind of amped and up for it. And I think from that point of view, both were reasonably successful. The Monday morning, I think it was Monday morning, Annabelle, we woke to the front page of the Herald with these images of Christopher Luxon, look, with a little bit of, I think whoever designed these ads for the CTU was probably given reference points that included Robert Muldoon and Benito Mussolini. And it says, out of touch, too much risk. And this is my question for you really is this the most exciting thing to happen to New Zealand print journalism since Harvey Norman? Wraparounds. They're all going to go for it now. It's like, this is gold. Or is Harvey Norman going to have a go at Noel Leeming on Saturday on the Weekend Herald? It's just going to be Harvey. What do you think?
Possibly.
I mean, was there?
The thing that I find interesting about it is as a journalist, is that a newspaper like the Herald would give its front page to such a political advertisement like this. And the other thing that's running on the Herald website too is what's it called? Reality check radio ads. So yeah, I thought it was an unusual decision by the Herald to run something like this at election time.
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
I mean, of course,
where do you draw the line?
Technically, it's not the front page. It's a sort of
wraparound
kind of fake front page. But you're right. Everyone says,
is it a page at the front? Yes, it is.
As someone else pointed out, above the fold, it just says Christopher Luxon. So if you see it on some of the newsstands, you'll be like, oh, that's it sounds good. There is a bit there is some of that risk, and a slightly different version of what we talked about before when the ACT Party ran digital billboards with Winston Peters' face on them, grinning wildly. And in this case, Ben, I mean, there are two things. One is whether or not how we don't know, but how do people respond to that? Do they think, oh yes, that makes me question that guy? Do they think that's a bit underhand? And then also, it kind of wiped out of the lead of the stories all of the discussion which we had earlier about the questions that are swirling around National's tax / what do we call it, fee.
Yeah, Edward Elder, who's a marketing academic at Auckland, I thought he actually gave a sort of good account of this on RNZ, where he said, traditionally, negative ads are nothing new in New Zealand at all, but traditionally they've been done with a kind of, a bit of a kind of tongue-in-cheek, sort of slightly kind of quote unquote funny, even if
the Cossacks were a bit jolly.
Yeah, even in John Key's case, kind of bordering a little bit on anti-Semitic jokes, but they were intended to be.
Were there? What were those?
Oh, the sort of shonky and international bankers stuff.
Right,
but there was always sort of this tinge of at least we're trying to be a little bit funny, and here it's just sort of almost, it seems like random snippets they might have grabbed from a focus group or something. Was it too much risk or something? Not a sort of naturalistic kind of way of talking or writing, but and so I tend to think it'll backfire. And I think he also observed. It allows Christopher Luxon, who actually, I think Luxon himself is very free from personal attacks, not so much in the National Party as a whole, but allows them to sort of go, kind of get the vapors a little bit and say, well, we are very disappointed in the negative tenor, the negative tenor of this corrupt, awful, failed
government. To which Chris Hipkins responded with, a massive dossier of the colour printer on the 9th floor of the Beehive got a real workout, and they produced a whole bunch of ads by alleged proxies of the National Party, which had various
I think conflating
in the end doesn't this just have the impact of people kind of being a bit put off the whole thing, particularly National Labour?
Yeah, I think it's just seen as unseemly. And to be fair, there was nothing funny about the iwi Kiwi ads that were being run during the Don Brash era. I think this is fairly tame. It's not incredibly nasty or personal. I do think that Labour's response to this has been stronger than National's. I feel like the way Chris Bishop tried to sort of joke it off when he was called out by a journalist for actually reposting that stuff.
That was perfect poster's brain. Like, we're all just.
I don't know what it is. I can't take responsibility for what I post on this.
We're all just piggies wandering into the timeline. The content slop just flowing through the holes in our brains.
Yeah, I don't think. I don't think this has hurt Labour, but I do think that it probably has hurt National, not necessarily through the ad itself, but through the way it's given Labour an opportunity to talk about the way they've been portrayed, people like Nanaia Mahuta and so on. So, yeah.
We've got to send you out of here to the grown-up murder house, but quickly before we leave...
The homicide house, that's what they call it when you're grown up.
Do they?
Yeah.
Fancy. The homicide palace. David Seymour continues to entertain us with his history curriculum, added to the list which already included Nelson Mandela, Hone Heke, all of the chiefs who signed the Treaty of Waitangi, is now Kate Shepherd, who would also have been out there eagerly voting for the Association of Consumers and Taxpayers. Any other suggestions of historical figures that would have certainly voted ACT?
Mini Deans?
I was thinking Moses, I can imagine him with a big magenta rosette. Ben?
I should have workshopped something on this. No, I think that
Malcolm X. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's. Sorry, I should have warned you. I was going to ask that.
It's just people always talk about a zombie apocalypse, but it's not that. It's just act early voters.
I was going to say, the next policy launch from the ACT is they're going to extend the franchise to dead people. All right, that's us. Let's go. Go to the dentist. Good luck out there, Annabelle. We'll be back very soon. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Talofa lava. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spin-Off. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spin-Off member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.